Hello there folks, and welcome back to the Football Games Room. Josh here reporting for duty once again with the latest topical team sheet, which this week is the Liverpool Banter Signings XI. Starting off in with the goalkeeper, I've gone for Donny. Signed in the summer of 2011 as backup for Pepe Reina, who hadn't missed a Premier League game in over 4 years, the Brazilian probably thought that pre-season friendlies and the odd away trip in the League Cup would be about as good as it would get. But with Reina's red card and subsequent suspension in April 2012, he was called into Premier League duty for the first time some 9 months after signing. 3 days later, he managed to eclipse Reina by not only receiving a red card, but also by giving away a penalty, and his total of 4 league appearances for the club are somehow not quite enough to enter him into Liverpool folklore. At right back is Philip Dagan. On arriving at Anfield, Dagan claimed that the move was a challenge for him, and that was certainly proven to be true when, on his debut for the Reds in a League Cup home tie with Crewe, he collided with teammate Sami Hyypiä, ending up with 2 broken ribs and a punctured lung. Just shy of 2 months later, Dagan returned in time for the next round of the competition, but again failed to finish the game, coming off this time with a broken metatarsal. He returned to Germany after 2 seasons, having made only 7 Premier League appearances, all during his final season. The second defender is the only signing of Jurgen Klopp to make this team sheet, Steven Corker. Arriving on loan in January 2016, he played barely 5 minutes across 3 substitute appearances in the Premier League for the Reds, all as a striker, which makes Klopp's recent successes all the more fascinating. Only 1 more appearance would follow, a goalless draw in the FA Cup against West Ham, this time playing the full 90 minutes in his preferred defensive position, before returning to parent club QPR. Joining those 2 in defence is one of the first names I go to when listing the worst Liverpool players ever. Spaniard Josemi was the prime example of how Rafa Benitez got his Spanish signings more wrong than right. The defender followed Benitez from Spain to Merseyside in 2004, but just 21 league appearances later, Benitez had had enough and sent him back to Spain in January 2006. At left back is a player often lauded as Liverpool's worst ever signing, a title which I think is a tad unfair, and I certainly don't think he's the worst player in this team sheet, but was enough of a joke to make it nevertheless. It is of course Paul Konchesky. Perhaps his time at Anfield is best illustrated by the fact that he was sent out on loan to second-tier Nottingham Forest just 4 months after signing, before joining Leicester on a permanent deal that summer. The first of the midfielders is Christian Poulsen, another of Roy Hodgson's one-season wonders, whose transfer leaves me questioning how it took the Liverpool board so long to sack the Englishman. Poulsen's career at clubs such as Schalke, Sevilla, Juventus, Liverpool and Ajax, as well as earning 92 caps for his national team, clearly flattered just how poor he was. Despite notching up a mind-blowing 12 Premier League appearances, Kenny Dalglish let him go to French side Evian after just 1 season at Anfield. Next up in midfield is Bruno Cheyrou, the first of Gerard Houlliér's French-speaking flops. The new Zidane is how Houllier described the midfielder upon signing him back in 2002, which would probably have been a more accurate comparison to Zinedine's son Luka, even though he was 4 at the time and would go on to be a goalkeeper. Half of Cheyrou's time as a Liverpool player was spent on loan in France, though his 5 goals and 48 appearances across 2 seasons at Anfield was somehow enough to earn him 2 caps for his national side, but he nevertheless returned to his homeland in 2006. Rounding off the midfield is arguably the most eligible candidate for Liverpool's worst ever signing, Jean-Michel Ferry. Arriving at the age of 29, when he should have been at the peak of his powers, the former French international just about managed the equivalent of a full half in a Liverpool shirt, playing 48 minutes across 2 substitute appearances, before Houllier realised the error of his ways and dispatched him just a year later. The first of our attackers is Sean Dundee, a player who clearly rated himself so highly that he deemed himself too good for his native South Africa and somehow good enough for Germany, who he was also eligible to play for. His signing was about the only thing co-managers Roy Evans and Gerard Houllier must have agreed on, and one can only assume that they'd used him on Sean Dundee's World Club Football, a video game released in 1997, and decided he was pretty good. But alas, he was pretty bad, and 1 year and 3 Premier League appearances later, he'd been sent back to Germany. The second attacker is one of Liverpool's infamous Southampton imports, Ricky Lambert, whose failure to make the grade at Anfield as a youth player saw him carve out quite the journeyman career across all 4 divisions in England before making his England debut at the age of 31. He signed for Liverpool just before playing for England at the 2014 World Cup, though the Three Lions' dreadful performance in Brazil would be a sign of things to come for the Anfield new boy. 3 goals in 36 games was enough to convince Brendan Rodgers that he'd made a mistake, and he was shipped off to West Brom after just a year. Rounding off the starting 11 is Fabio Borini, the first banter signing Brendan Rodgers graced the Anfield faithful with, as he brought the Chelsea reject to Liverpool for £10.5 million in 2012. Clearly encouraged by the 6 goals he'd scored in 9 league appearances as they won promotion with Swansea, Rodgers was most likely perplexed as the Italian scored only 3 goals in 38 games in all competitions for Liverpool, and he was sold to Sunderland in 2015 at a £2.5 million loss. As for the manager, there was only ever going to be one choice, wasn't there? Roy Hodgson, Liverpool's shortest reigning manager ever, was appointed at Anfield after a successful 3 years at Fulham as a replacement for legendary boss Rafa Benitez. And it's hard to imagine why he failed, when you consider that his signings included John Joe Shelvey, Milan Jovanovic, Danny Wilson, Christian Poulsen, Brad Jones, and yes, Paul Konchesky, having also let the likes of Yossi Benayoun and Javier Mascherano depart the club. Unsurprisingly, Hodgson's job was rumoured to be on the line barely 2 months into his first season, and he was eventually sacked in January 2011, with the Reds barely in the top half of the table. And so to the subs bench. For the number 2 keeper, I've gone for Adam Bogdan, who even by Liverpool standards was a bizarre signing. But as the saying goes, one man's trash is another man's treasure, and Brendan Rodgers clearly thought he'd seen something in the Hungarian, who had only gone to make 2 league appearances for the club. The substitute defenders are Andre De Sena and Jan Kromkamp, both signed by Benitez and who, between them, managed 32 league appearances in 3 seasons. Despite scoring against Real Madrid and Manchester United as a substitute makeshift left winger, both within the space of a week, De Sena was never really able to fill his predecessor John Anaris's shoes, leaving after only 2 years, whilst Dutchman Kromkamp was at Anfield for no longer than 8 months before returning to the Netherlands. And the fact that he was signed on a swap deal with Hosseini leaves me genuinely wondering which club believed they got the better end of the deal. Alongside those 2 on the bench are midfielders Charlie Adam and Lazar Markovic. Adam's time at Liverpool is perhaps best summed up by Craig Bellamy in his autobiography, and the Scotsman was eventually disposed of after just a year, joining Stoke at a loss of almost £3 million. The Serbian Markovic actually played more games on loan than he did for Liverpool during his half a decade as a Red. Signed by Rodgers in 2014, he made all of his appearances for the club in his first season, before going on loan at 4 clubs in as many countries and eventually joining Fulham on a free transfer, meaning Liverpool didn't recoup a single penny of the £20 million they'd spent on him. And the substitute strikers are, perhaps unsurprisingly, Christian Benteke and El Hadj Diouf. Benteke's 9 goals in 29 PL appearances for Liverpool probably left Brendan Rodgers feeling a little duped, having spent £32.5 million on the big Belgian. Even his best goal for the club, an overhead powerhouse against better rivals Manchester United, was usurped by teenager Anthony Martial's debut goal for the Red Devils. Diouf, meanwhile, has a scoring record that is so bad, it makes you wonder whether any George Graham-style bungs were involved in his transfers to each of the 6 English clubs he played for. An embarrassing 3 goals in 55 league appearances, or even worse than that, 6 goals in 79 appearances in all competitions, is perhaps surpassed only by his total of just 47 goals in 368 games in England. So that rounds off the Liverpool Banter Signings 11, and I hope that you, like me, have managed to take this opportunity to laugh at Liverpool, particularly at the time when they deserve it the most. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to comment which changes you would make below, and of course make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Well, that's all from me for today. Topical Team Sheets will return next Wednesday, but I'll be back on Friday with Tom with episode 2 of Name Them All. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you then.